Problems, ladies and gentlemen. The little subheading the book gives for this particular type of word problems is they call these multiple step word problems. If you hear the word multiple step, Sammy, what does that mean to you or me?
You have to do more than one step.
Exactly. And if you have to do more than one step, what do you think I'm going to tell you that you need to do? They're not necessarily always algorithms, although that would be a thing there. You are definitely on this going to have to sketch the problem out and show work. Because if it says it's multiple steps, okay, that means you're going to have to do more than one thing. And when you start doing more than one thing, okay, you start losing what place you're in or when you're doing something. So let me write down this problem here. Let's see here. Stan. How about Stan? Let's use Stan today. Stan is 5 years older than Robert. Stan is 5 years older than Robert. Robert is 3 years older than Sally. Robert is 3 years older than Sally. Sally is 15 years old. Sally is 15 years old. How old is Stan? Okay. And some people are good enough at this where they might be able to do that in their head, but I can tell you, if somebody gave me this problem to do, if I was taking a class, first thing I'd do is I'd draw some pictures. And they don't have to be pictures of people, but they're pictures that show how they relate to each other. In other words, if Stan is 5 years older than Robert, okay, if I draw a little thing here, and this stands for Stan, what do you think I'm going to draw for Robert? If Stan is 5 years older than Robert, who said it? Somebody said, I'm going to draw something smaller, because Robert, I know, is younger. Okay, and what you could do is, you know what their difference is. The gap between them is how long? 5 years. Stan is 5 years older, so you could actually put a little space there and say that space is 5 years because that's the difference in their ages. And then Robert is 3 years older than Sally. Okay, so how do Robert and my next person, Sally, compare? Is Sally going to be bigger than Robert or smaller than Robert if Robert is 3 years older? Sally's going to be smaller again. So here's Sally, my gal Sal. And the difference between her and Robert is 3 years. So there's a gap of 3 years there. Okay. Now, once I have that drawn there, what do they tell me here? Sally is 15 years old. So if Sally's 15, Robert must be how old if there's 3 years difference? And he's bigger. Brooke?
18.
Robert must be 18. And if Robert's 18 and there's 5 years difference between him and Stan is older, how old does Stan have to be, Alex?
23.
23. Okay? And the question they asked was how old was Stan? So you just that down here. Stan must be 23 years old. And again, you don't have to, you could probably draw just lines or whatever, but I like kind of boxes, it gives a thing there. But I need to see that work there because there's a lot of steps in there. There's a lot, you know, it doesn't go directly from Sally to Stan, so you kind of need to show what's going on there, how they relate to each other, and how they're different there. Let's try another one, because I can tell you're so excited about this. I'm sure math is probably everyone's favorite here. How about this one? Bill earns $16 for every hour he works. Bill earns $16. That's a lot of money for every hour he works. If he works more than 8 hours, if he works more than 8 hours, he earns $24 an hour. He earns $24 an hour. Bill worked 10 hours. How much did he make? Any thoughts on what we could jot down to help us out with that one? In other words, Bill earns $16 an hour for every hour, except when he works more than 8 hours. When he works more than 8 hours, he earns $24 an hour for anything over those 8 hours. So I suppose the best thing to do, and you kind of draw the thing here, if he works 8 hours, how much is he going to make? Here's my 8 hours. Okay, he works 8 hours and he makes $16 every hour. So how much is he going to make after 8 hours? 16 times 8. Okay, he makes $128 here. Okay, but he works more than that. How much longer than 8 hours does he work? He works another 2 hours. And how much does he make for those 2 hours? He makes $24 an hour. Well, if he makes $24 an hour for 2 hours, how much does he make for those 2 hours? What is 24 times 2? He makes $48 an hour there, or $48 total there. How much is he going to make altogether? Well, you have to take your 128 he makes for the first, $176 total for both of those. Okay, why is it multiple steps there? Because you have to do one step for the first 8 hours. Okay, and then, well, this probably should say he earns $24 an hour for each hour over it, or whatever it is, just to make sure it says there. And then the last one, write this one down. One more here. Case studied twice as long as Tammy. Twice as long as Tammy. Abby studied for 10 minutes longer, for 10 minutes longer than Kate. Tammy studied for 40 minutes. Now this is what the book says after that. They don't just ask you this. They say, which expression can you use to find how much Abby studied? Now take a look at this. You got that written down so far? A, here's your choice A. 40 times 2 plus 10 B, write this down and we'll talk about it. 40 divided by 2 minus 10. Oops, this one should have been, sorry, this should have been a C. I'm doing away with both this. B is 40 times 2 minus 10, and the letter D, 40 divided by 2 plus 10. To give you a chance to write all that down, and then we're going to talk about this here. Write all of that down, and then we're going to talk. Because you are going to run across problems like this in your book, and it looks really confusing to me, but I think it's easier once you sit down and think about it for a little while. Everybody got it?
No. I can't understand that.
Don't worry, I'm gonna move it. Some of us just aren't very patient.
I'm getting it.
Kay studied twice as long as Tammy. Abby studied for 10 minutes longer than Kay. Tammy studied for 40 minutes. Which of those expressions can you use to figure out how long Abby studied? I'm not asking for answers yet. If that's what your hands are raised for. Have I got it written down?
Yes.
Minutes. Where is this here? Ron? What? Any other questions? Everybody's got it written down? Okay, first things first. Again, sketch down the information you have so you can see how they compare here. Okay, so what do you know? Kay studied twice as long as Tammy, so what am I going to do? If this is my K, what will Tammy be? If Kay studied twice as long, well, then Tammy is going to be half as much, right? Because Kay studied twice as much. So here's Tammy. She's half as big because Kay studied twice as much. You put two Tammys together, you get a K, but you don't have to be exact. Okay? Abby studied for 10 minutes longer than Kay. So what's Abby going to look like? Okay, she's going to be taller than Kay by 10 minutes. So we know how they relate here. Here's my, I can put my little 10 minutes here because that's the difference. Okay, now let's figure out how much they all studied here. If Tammy studied for 40 minutes, we should be able to figure out how much everybody else studied for. By the way, this is, so if she studied for 40 minutes, Kay studied twice as long, so Kay studied for how long?
8 minutes.
80 minutes. And Abby studied for 10 more minutes than Kay, so Abby is 90 minutes. We need to figure out which of these four things will give us 90 minutes, because that's how long she studied. Or what did we do? Think about the process that we did. What did we do to the 40 to get 80? We times it by 2, multiplied by 2, and then to go from the 80 to 90, I added 10. So which one of these is something times 2 added to 10? That's going to be the answer you want. Which Maggie Dervis is. Looks like letter A. 40 times 2 plus 10. Okay, now so you didn't have to write the problem down, but when you do it in your book, sketch that out, do it out, and then see which one of these comes up to do the same thing that you did to find that answer. Wasn't that exciting? just like yesterday's author. Excitement never ends.